What is happening, my good people? How's it going? What is the latest and greatest? What is going on in your world? Everybody knows what's going on in my world as I'm getting ready for a big-time live stream. The 2025 Major League Baseball preview as tomorrow, opening day. And I understand a week ago, this past Thursday, or Tuesday, I should say, a week ago yesterday, the season began in Tokyo, Dodgers-Cubs. Dodgers already off to a 2-0 start. Cubs 0-2. Yes, we could discuss that till we're blue in the face, but really the opening day, the baseball season, the curtain raises tomorrow. And I do not like the start times of these games where the first game, Brewers, Yankees, 3 o'clock, and you have a lot of the other games at 4, 10, couple of night games, even late night on the West Coast. That I do not like. I'd like to have it uniform to where a majority of the games start at 1:05. And then you have games at 3, 4, 7, no 10 o'clock games. It's opening day. We should revere this day. And when we look at the sports landscape, let's face it, opening day, baseball does a lot better. Not maybe from a ratings perspective, but does a lot better than NBA opening night, even NFL opening day. And I get it that, yes, people could look at the Thursday night game of the Super Bowl winner that Thursday, which you all know it's a standalone game. We're going to look to that Sunday, week 1 of the NFL. But even then, it doesn't have the same feel, doesn't have the same appeal, where here, especially in the Northeast, with not only 1 but 2 baseball teams waiting for spring to arrive. And even though the weather has gotten a little bit better as of late, but it's a thing where we look forward to the warmer days. We look forward to longer days, where NFL is the end of summer. And even though everybody has their arms open wide for the Shield, for the National Football League, but we understand that baseball, there is a certain level when it comes to opening day, and it's ushered in. And everything that I mentioned, with summertime approaching, no matter where you live in this country. So to me, opening day in baseball is the best out of all the opening days, and these games should start at 1 o'clock, not 3 o'clock, not 4:05, and I get it. I guess it's the world we live in, so I have to discuss that. But now let's get right to it. And my guy Val B in the room, Giant fan. We're going to talk about the Giants a little bit later. I know it's Golden State Warriors lost, and I'll put that up there just for you, Val. Giants fan, MLB, which we'll get into. Warriors. Maybe in the back end, I'll talk what's going on in sports as we get ready for a podcast tomorrow where I'll talk about anything and everything that's happening in the world of sports. Very little baseball, because that's why I'm doing this here exclusively, to have the Major League Baseball preview right here for each and every one of you to sink your teeth in, to enjoy, etc. But I do have to start off with some housekeeping. And for starters, yes, welcome to the Wednesday live stream. Today is March 26th, of course, as you all know. But all I got to say is, with all that is going on here with the podcast and everything that has transpired here over the last month, especially ushering in my 7th year, or really starting my 8th year of this podcast, on top of these weekly live streams that I've started, in essence, a week prior to the Wednesday live stream here earlier in the month. But now this is going to be an occurrence. Obviously, I'm feeling out whether or not the time frame fits 12 to, let's say, 1, maybe 1:30, depending on how far or how long it goes. So we have that to look forward to each and every Wednesday. So in essence, I'm having 3 podcasts in 1 week. But considering I'm strictly getting into Major League Baseball, because with the season beginning tomorrow, and even at the back end, I'll throw in a couple of other nuggets that I probably should unpack. Who are the Steelers going to go for quarterback? And there's only one guy that's out there right now. And we all know who that is. So maybe I'll touch on that. But to me, I want this to be about baseball. And for those who are going to watch this on a replay, please leave a comment. I encourage you to do so. So whatever it is I'm going to say here throughout the course of this hour, and of course, every live stream moving forward, you have every opportunity to not only leave a comment, but I'll be checking that to make sure that I can respond and follow up to whatever questions, whatever comments, whatever suggestions, whatever just crazy off-the-wall things that I say. But of course, it's going to be credible. It's going to be accurate, but you may disagree with that, and it's fine. Because this is the toy department of live sports. So we're going to bandy about certain topics, certain discussions, certain storylines, etc. And you may agree or disagree with that. So, of course, leave a comment, as I would appreciate that. And whomever's in the chat room, as you already saw there with Val B., who is a big-time Giant Warrior fan. And I got to find out whether or not he is from the West Coast. I would assume so. Bay Area, San Francisco. But share your thoughts in the chat room. Whoever's going to jump on board, please do so. This is going to be a fun hour. I would say maybe a little bit more than an hour, depending on where this is going to go and what direction. But for those who are in the chat, I encourage you to do that. I'll post your comments up on the screen. I'll make sure that whatever you want to throw out there, whatever it is that you want to voice from a text standpoint, I'll be more than happy to put it up there for everybody to see. So you have that to also discuss. And yeah, all right, thank you, Val. I appreciate that. And there's a case in point. He made a nice comment, even if it wasn't a nice comment. And not that I'm encouraging nasty comments, but you know what? As long as it's respectable, as long as it's not personal, let's start there, then we can go ahead and do that. But now let's get right to it. The reason why this live stream is going to take place today, and let's jump on board my 2025 Major League Baseball preview. And I'm going to start off with the top storylines in my estimation. And let me just take a sip of water. This is water, not vodka, so. Or tequila for that matter, because of course that also a clear spirit, rum, etc. But no, I am high on life. I am high on this baseball platform that I'm on, or soapbox, whatever you want to call, because this is going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. Considering that I'm doing this live, even better. So my top storylines. What can I say? And yes, let me give a shout out to my guy Bio Zio out on the West Coast as well. Much appreciate you, my man, as always. So my top storylines. I understand we could go to Dodgers. That's pretty much the low-hanging fruit. And I'm going to talk about them more on the back end of the storylines. But we all know, coming off of a championship season, and of course, shout out to my guy Bio, who is obviously a big-time Dodger fan. Already a 2-0 start. Their over-under number in Vegas is 104.5. So if you bet the over, they have to win 105 games, which certainly is attainable considering the amount of talent that they have on this team. But for LA, the Dodgers, looking for that first repeat since the late 90s, where they won 3 in a row, as you recall, 98, 99, 2000. And for the Dodgers, it's all right in front of them. And a lot of people may even bet to think that they're going to be the first team in 25 years to do so. I will talk more about that later. I just wanted to kind of set the stage here for the storylines. We know the Dodgers, they're going to be a lightning rod with all of their talent, with all of their resources, etc., and obviously defending a World Series championship as they did last year. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. But when I'm looking at this season and how I'm going to break this down, to me, when you look at both leagues, you got to start off with the National League, it being so top-heavy, where the American League, it is so wide open. And even with the Yankees and all their injuries here throughout the course of the spring, obviously Garrett Cole on the shelf with Tommy John surgery, Luis Hill, the reigning AL Rookie of the Year, who's going to be out with a lat strain for about 2 months minimum. Now you have Clark Schmidt, their other starter, who has to sit out at least the first go-around in the rotation, the first 5 days with a shoulder strain or shoulder issues. And even with the pitching woes that the Yankees have, and those Giancarlo Stanton, as we know, as he has elbow inflammation on both elbows. A lot of people may think the Yankees could come back to the pack. And although I think the AL is still wide open, but to me, the Yankees are the creme de la creme in the American League. But you cannot compare the National League, as top-heavy as it is, Dodgers, Phillies, Braves, Mets, Padres, you want to say Brewers, Cubs, to a lesser degree. I mean, you have Diamondbacks, you got to throw them in the mix. Those are right now, count them, 6 or 7 teams that certainly, if you put them in the American League, you could argue whether or not that they would come out of the American League as a representative for the World Series. And that's a lot, because in the American League, after the Yankees, are the Astros the same team that we've seen year after year? Obviously, they lose Alex Bregman, and they do not resemble the team that they once were. Kyle Tucker, of course, in Chicago. So you cannot look at the Astros as a bona fide, I got to pencil them in as the American League representative for a World Series. Not in the least. Red Sox, they made some big-time improvements, as we know. Starting pitching, Garrett Crochet, as well as Walker Buehler. They bring in Alex Bregman there late in the winter, right before spring training. And they have a nice young core that they're going to put out there to go along with, hopefully, a healthy Trevor Story on top of Rafael Devers. But does that automatically mean that the Red Sox are going to be penciled in for World Series? Absolutely not. The AL Central, which had 3 teams in that division, a lot of people could look at that as one of the weakest. Started last year. But if you're going to have 3 teams represent in the postseason in the American League, whether you're the Cleveland Guardians, whether you're the Detroit Tigers or the Kansas City Royals, but any one of those 3 teams, yes, they can be representative in the World Series. But at the same time, when you look at the National League in comparison, those teams can't match up. And then you have the AL West. You're not going to look at the Texas Rangers, despite them winning a World Series 2 years ago. Now, granted, I'm sure they're going to be better than what they were last year and hit a lot better, considering the way they hit in 2023. But are they a shoo-in in your estimation as far as them making it to a World Series? Or even the Seattle Mariners, who have pitching galore but do not have the horses offensively? I'm not going to say Cal Riley, who just signed that long contract to catcher, 6 years, $106 million? And good for him. But the Mariners aren't going to be shaking in my boots if I'm a team in the National League that's going to face off against them in a World Series. So that's why the disparity of both leagues. And granted, you can pretty much pencil in the teams that are going to be in the National League when it's all said and done come October. I understand you have to factor in injuries. I understand there could be some upstart teams, as we saw there a couple of years ago with the Diamondbacks getting to a World Series where nobody saw that coming. But let's face it, the National League is superior to the American League. And therefore, when we're going to look at the big picture of 162 games, it could be a formality in the senior circuit as to which team is going to make it to the postseason, where in the American League, as the year goes along, unless you're going to get a surprise here and there, but we could look at that more or less as a juggling act from not 1 month to the next, 1 week to the next. You may have the Yankees flying high. Oh, they look like they're going to be the team to beat in the American League. But then the next week, it could be the Texas Rangers. Or the following week, it could be the Kansas City Royals. Oh, wait a minute. Here come the Red Sox joining the mix. And that's good for baseball in that regard, because you do not want to have it to where both leagues, although in recent years, whether it has been the Yankees or the Astros or even the Red Sox, who went to just 4 years ago an American League Championship Series, it's good to have not necessarily a balance, but it's good to have it spread out, because the last thing that baseball needs, and this is going to be storyline number 2, the last thing it needs is to have top-heavy teams with big-time payrolls, and not that it guarantees them a World Series, as we've seen, albeit notwithstanding last year with the Dodgers. But here it is. We are now, think about this, people, less than 2 years away from this current collective bargaining agreement closing. And I understand that's going to be more for next year. At the start, this time, a year from now, when the CBA is going to be all the rage in baseball. But the reason why it has to be talked about now is because Armageddon is coming. And I talked about this on my podcast, as I'm sure you probably see it scrolling on the bottom. Please subscribe. Apple, Spotify, YouTube channel at J Reels every Monday and Thursday. So for baseball, that although we can wait a year, and Jerry Mills, come on, it's a little bit premature. Let's let the season play out, and then next year you want to bring this up, that's fine. But when you have Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's going to be a big-time free agent going into next year, and right, he could have a monster year and could get maybe $500 million. But he's a guy that is an anomaly. He's a guy that is going to probably warrant that much considering the back of his baseball card. And is he worth $500 million when it's all said and done, similar to Juan Soto 765? Of course, that is an exorbitant amount of money. But that's the industry that it is. Whether it's the NBA players making $60 million a year, or the quarterback in football making $55, $60 million a year, or the baseball player now making $50 million a year, that's just how it is. There's nothing we can do about it. Right, we understand that teachers need to get paid more. We understand that there's other people that certainly are just scrapping by, and that's a whole other issue. But this is how baseball is. And if baseball doesn't find a way to curtail that, knowing that in December of 2026, when the collective bargaining agreement expires and when the meeting of the minds comes to the table with the owners and the head of the players union, this could be a long 15-round knockdown, drag down, all-out brawl. And I bring that up now because you're going to hear the whispers as you get closer to the All-Star break, as you get closer to the end of the season, and then once the season's over, everybody's going to talk about it. But I'm talking about it now because baseball needs a facelift. And yes, they've tweaked the rules and they've made it faster, and it doesn't matter. Baseball is near and dear to my heart. It's number one and always will be my first love. So let them take 5 years to fix it in order for them to maybe get a salary cap, in order for them to have the balance and parity of the sport, despite the fact you saw Arizona make it to a World Series a couple of years ago, that it's not going to be Yankees Dodgers every year or Yankees Phillies or Red Sox Phillies or any one of those big-time market teams. Understood. But that is going to be a discussion that's going to start off slow this year, but when you get to the end of the year, it's going to gain traction. And boy, this time next year, forget about it. So that's why I'm bringing this up now because, yes, we can kick our feet back and enjoy the season, and yes, we shall do that. But the big elephant in the room is what's looming. And as we all know, baseball needs a salary cap. And people can say, Jerry Rose, you're out of your mind. What do you say? How does it work for the NFL? How does it work for the NBA? I understand you got the second apron coming in, but still, there is a cap there. NHL, same deal. I understand it has to be a ceiling, but it also has to be a floor too. So that goes out to the Marlins, that goes out to the Rockies, that goes out to those teams that are never in contention. And I understand the Marlins got to a playoff a couple of years ago. But what is going to happen here with baseball as we get into this season and beyond? And then that's going to lead to the third storyline, which I think is important for the sport. How are the Cincinnati Reds of the world? How are the Pittsburgh Pirates of the world? How are the Tampa Bay Rays, the Athletics? I know they're not Oakland anymore. How are those teams, and even, let's just say, the Cleveland Guardians of the world, who won a division and got to an ALCS last year. But those are teams that, in essence, are small markets. Those are teams that have not really been at the pinnacle of their sport, making it to a World Series and winning a World Series. Yes, I understand the Guardians last year and what they did. But look what the Guardians had done in the offseason. They traded one of their best hitters in Josh Naylor to Arizona, and they also traded a very good, solid infielder and former All-Star in Andres Jimenez to Toronto. So here they are pairing off contracts, knowing that they can't either re-sign in Josh Naylor or in Jimenez, who they signed to a big deal where it's like, this is not going to be sustainable for us, so we're going to have to unload them. So where's the middle ground here when it comes to those teams? So for Pittsburgh, that has big-time pitching, as we all know, led by Paul Skeens, and the Reds, who have Ellie De La Cruz and now a manager in Terry Francona, who I'm sure is going to go to the front office if they're in the race, let's say July, right before the deadline. I understand they're not going to make a big splash, but they could try to piecemeal it together with some reinforcements to think that, all right, well, can we bring this relief pitcher or maybe this third starter on a team that's obviously out to sea for 2025? Or even, let's say, a team like the Athletics, who have certainly done some signings within their own team, whether your name is Brent Rooker or even Lawrence Butler. But let's say if they happen to be in the mix, are they going to be able to bring in some talent and be a part of the August, September pennant races to try to match up against the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Mets, Phillies, etc.? And that's going to be important because in order for baseball to thrive and maybe even survive, they need to have those middle teams involved because it can't be all New York, LA, Boston, Philly. You want to sprinkle in Atlanta? I understand that's not a big-time market when you come to the coasts along those a lot, although it's easy to look at a team like the Braves as a big market team. But how I'm forecasting this is that we want to see those other teams be able to have some success, be able to have some legs. And even though I talked about the Marlins not contending, but look at what they did a couple of years ago. And I understand in 2020, they did the same, small sample size because of the pandemic, where they were 31-29 and they qualified for the postseason and actually won a wild card round in Chicago to beat the Cubs. But if you want to compete with those other sports, a la NFL, NBA to a lesser degree, NHL, all right, fine. But they need to have some success with those other markets and those other teams. And we understand we have the cable scenarios with the certain franchises that don't have that tie-in, that whole thing with the RSN, the regional sports networks, how that bottomed out, and that Major League Baseball had to come in. And not every team is going to have a network, a la Boston with NESN, a la the Mets with SNY, a la the Yankees with the Yes Network, and some of the other teams that have networks. And I get it that they're in major markets that people say, well, Jay Reels, they have resources coming out of the wazoo. Understood. But in order, one more time, for baseball to really get some meat on their bones and look at teams like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and the Athletics and even the Rays, who have had success. And right now, they're a team that's going to be playing, not to their fault, but they're going to be playing in a minor league ballpark. And you have a situation where who knows where they're going to be in the next few years. And the Athletics are going to be going to Vegas, or at least so we think. And this is why it's important for those markets and those teams to try to get better and to have that balance. Because, yes, I understand you can get lightning in a bottle like the Marlins a couple of years ago, or maybe to a certain extent the Diamondbacks, although they have a good team. But look what they did that postseason. Sweeping the Dodgers, of all teams, in the division series, and then coming back from a 3-2 deficit in Philadelphia to beat the Phillies to go to a World Series. Now, how often does that happen? Not that often. So that's why those teams are important for the life of baseball. And we understand it's going to be more controlled by the big boys on the block, the aforementioned teams that play in the big markets. But just like in football, the Cincinnati Bengals could get to a Super Bowl a few years ago. That's where baseball, granted Arizona, all right, but they need more of that. They need to have those teams that are at least going to be in play here when we get down the stretch of a season and maybe even into October. Because, yes, Yankees, Dodgers is sexy, and any of those big market teams would be great. But you can't have that all the time. You can't have it every year. Why are the Kansas City Chiefs successful? Granted, they have a legendary and a generational quarterback, but the Chiefs, it's not that the Jets and Giants are always there. All right, the Rams won a few years ago, but what about the other Los Angeles team? So we could go to the big markets. The Chicago Bears have been awful. We could go to the big markets. How about the Cowboys? They haven't been to a Super Bowl in 30 years. So that's why, to me, baseball needs that. Where the NFL, they can survive on not having those teams get there because we all know the fantasy and the gambling aspect. And you can have, as I've said a million times, Carolina and Jacksonville can play in a Super Bowl, and you'll still get close to 100, if not more than 100 million watch the game. Are people going to get, let's say, 10 million to watch Arizona and Texas? Now, we understand baseball and football are light years ahead, or light years behind, I should say, baseball compared to football as far as for the people that are going to view a World Series as opposed to a Super Bowl, understood, but still. Now, I know I'm getting too wrapped up in this as far as the storylines go, because like, come on, Jay Reels, let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. And I will. But all this factors into this upcoming year. I'm sorry. And now when we get to it, as far as this season, and this is twofold. As I pull this up here, let me see what the next, here it is. Who in the NL could overtake the Dodgers? Because as top-heavy as the league is, and a couple of years ago we saw what happened there with Arizona. Understood. But the Dodgers, as stacked as they are, as loaded as they are, what other teams in the National League could upset that apple cart? Could it be the Philadelphia Phillies? Could it be the Mets? Could it be Atlanta? I think any of those teams are certainly formidable to give the Dodgers a run for their money. Now we have to wait and see once we get to October, which is obviously 6+ months away from now. But the Dodgers, as spectacular as they are, and coming off of a World Series, and knowing that despite all of their riches, and yes, there's going to be a little bit of pressure, but I think a lot of that pressure now has been let out of the balloon, because we could look back at the pandemic, them winning in 2020, and people could say, oh, that wasn't a real World Series, blah, blah, blah. I got to count it, and I wouldn't even argue it because of what they had to go through. No home games. They had to play in their protective bubble. They had to play a lot of those games in Globe Life Field there in Texas. So therefore, they didn't have the confines of playing in their building or playing in front of their home fans. They didn't even have a parade. So knowing that after winning last year, where they hadn't won a full 162-game season with the World Series since 1988 up until last year, now, even with bringing in Blake Snell and Tanner Scott and Roki Sasaki, yes, you would think the pressure is ratcheted up more, which to a certain extent it is, I will say, but not to say they can put their feet up, not to say that they're playing with house money, and not to say they have zero pressure on them. But they won. They know what it takes to win. The one thing you worry about them, though, is having that flip-the-switch mentality. And I talked about this on the podcast last week. Are they going to be a juggernaut this year, or are they going to sleepwalk through the year? And to me, I think they're going to be more of a juggernaut than a sleepwalk. I don't know if they're going to match the 116-46 Seattle Mariners of 2001. And we all know they didn't even get to a World Series, let alone win it. But I think the Dodgers are going to have a big year, monster year. Postseason, as we all know, it's a roll of the dice. But who can overtake them? I think it's one of four teams. Obviously, Philly, Atlanta, the Mets, and you can either end or Arizona or San Diego, only because they're the last two teams that have beaten them in the postseason prior to them winning a World Series last year. Padres in 22, and they actually had them on the ropes last year in the division series, as you know, with a 2-1 series lead with a Game 4 in their building. And the Diamondbacks, as I've talked about, is on blue in the face. Dodger blue, that is. Just like the ticker and the graphic there that you see on the screen. So for those teams that can overtake the Dodgers, I think they can. Will they? Well, that we'll have to wait and find out, because I'll talk about that later on with my World Series prediction. And then the American League, like I said, wide open, Yankees. I still think they're the favorites in my estimation. Does that mean they're going to get to a World Series? You have to find out. But I think they are, because even with their decimated rotation and their questionable lineup, there isn't really another powerhouse in the American League that I could say, yeah, they could definitely overtake the Yanks and win the American League. I've detailed it. I've highlighted it. And when I go through the divisions, I'll even get into more. And with that being said, let's break it down. And I'll start with the American League. I'll go American League through the National League. I'm going to save the Mets for last as a preview to talk about my beloved Amazings. So for the American League, and I'll start with the AL East, of course, Yankees. Talked about them already. What more can I say about them? Red Sox also, I think that they're going to have a big year. Big year for them means that they're going to get back into the postseason, considering that they've really fallen on hard times for them over the last few years since they made the ALCS in 2021. Now, to me in this division, the Orioles, they're a wild card here. And the one thing that scares me about them is that they did nothing this offseason. What, bringing in Charlie Morton to be a third starter? As it is, Grayson Rodriguez is not going to start opening day, or he's not going to be a part of the rotation for God knows how long, because he has that elbow issue, which that is obviously a red flag. And yes, they have stars abound. And arguably their biggest star is not going to be up with the team as he has that ab issue with that thoracic between the rib and that issue that he has in his abdomen. So with him not being penciled in on opening day, despite the fact Adley Rutschman, who was not good in the second half of the year, and you have Jackson Holliday, who's going to be up with the big club here to start off the year, and I'm sure he's going to be a Rookie of the Year candidate when it's all said and done. And the Jordan Westbergs of the world and the Colton Cowsers to go along with the veterans there, and Ryan Mountcastle and Cedric Mullins. And yes, their lineup is still going to be good even without Henderson right now, but their rotation. And even though they get Felix Bautista back, who was their closer, who was out with Tommy John last year, to go along with Yanier Cano, and that makes up a good back of the bullpen. But who's going to start these games? The Dean Kramers of the world and guys like that. I mean, to me, that's not going to be enough. And who knows if they're going to get pitching at the deadline. So I look at them as a wild card. They could be a team that could contend or a team that's just going to be floundering and maybe flirting, and maybe they do get into the postseason, but certainly not as formidable as you would thought dating back to last year when they came off of winning a division. And a lot of people thought they were going to have a big-time year. I think they're going to go to the World Series. And how did that prediction go? So that's all you got to know about the Orioles there. And the Rays, I got news for you. The Rays are a team that they have good pitching. Their lineup, obviously, is one that you can't pick out from a lineup. So with the Yandy Diaz of the world, and yes, I understand the kid, Junior Caminero, is a guy that a lot of people are going to look at. Maybe another Rookie of the Year candidate there in the same division with Jackson Holliday. But the Rays, and with their schedule the way it is, where they're going to have to play a lot of those home games, they're going to have to front load a ton of those games. When you think about it, 47, I believe, of their first 61 or whatever it is are at home, or 63, whatever the number is. Let me see if I can do the math properly. No. 47 of their first 59 games are at home. I mean, think about that. And then 69 of the final 103 are on the road. That is a gauntlet, if you ask me. So I don't know if the Rays are going to be any good as far as them trying to compete in that division. To me, that remains to be seen. But then you have Toronto, where Toronto had pitching. Of course, Vladdy's going to be the big giant question all year. Granted, he's not going to want to negotiate to be a distraction throughout the course of the regular season, but that's going to be all on the minds, especially when it comes to how he's going to perform. How he's going to perform. And Bo Bichette, is he going to be a guy that's also going to be looking for the exits too? So you have to think about that. They're pitching solid, very good, headlined by Jose Barrios and Kevin Goffman, but you can't look at the Jays. They could also be one of those teams that could be maybe mid to high 80s, but wouldn't be surprised if they're mid to high 70s and out of the playoffs. So to me, I think it's the Yankees' division to lose. Now, the Red Sox, I think they're going to get them a run for their money, and who knows, maybe they can surprise and win a division when it's all said and done. But I think that's a two-team race, considering that the Yankees have come back to the pack with their issues, and the Red Sox could be on the up in the AL East. Now, as far as the Central goes, to me, that's a pick-em. I like Kansas City. They have good starting pitching, and they have a very good bullpen. And they brought in Carlos Estevez, who I get it, was fine in L.A. as a closer. His last image on a mound last year was the grand slam to Francisco Lindor in Game 4 of the Division Series. But he goes to Kansas City with Lucas Erceg, who's a very good closer, or a very good reliever. Shouldn't say closer because now that belongs to Estevez. And their bullpen's probably going to carry them throughout the course of the season. That's going to be led by a rotation with Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo and Michael Walker, who actually pitched pretty well last year. And with the perennial, you would think, MVP candidate and one Bobby Witt, I think that they could have a very big year. The Guardians, let's see if they could do a carbon copy. I understand that their bullpen is going to be beyond solid. And even though their bullpen fizzled on them in what was the biggest spots in the postseason last year against the Yankees, so that strength became a weakness quick. So for the Guardians, I think they could also have a big year. But just like I talked about in years past, and maybe even alluded to last year, the Guardians are a team that's built for the regular season. I don't know if they're built for October. And yes, they still have Jose Ramirez, and they have Stephen Kwan, who's a very good leadoff hitter, contact hitter, good outfielder. And they do not have a lineup that's going to scare you. I'm sorry. The Lane Thomases of the world, is that a guy that's, whoa, wow, I got to watch out for him if I'm an opposing manager. So, yeah, solid team. Spectacular, no. And then the same can be said about the Tigers. But the Tigers, who had that crazy run at the end of the year, and yes, they did beat the Astros in the wild card round before they got pushed to the brink in the 5th game against the Guardians and lost. But with Tarek Skubal and with Jack Flaherty coming back, and they have the young Jackson Jobe, who a lot of people think he could be a Rookie of the Year candidate there in the AL, and with a lineup that is respectable with Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson, who is a #1 consensus baseball prospect dating back a few years ago, and it's not been anything but that in his first few years in Detroit, but it had a monster spring where he hit 5 home runs, he batted .340, so maybe he's going to be a late bloomer here and break out. So if you're the Tigers, maybe with Torkelson and their lineup, especially with their starting pitching. Now, Jason Riley's a closer. I don't know, a little suspect, but the Tigers could also have a big year and piggyback from what they did at the end of last year and into October. As far as the Twins, I understand that they can be hanging around. They have players, Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton is now healthy. All right, let's see come May and June if he's still going to be healthy in that regard. And yeah, the Twins, I don't know. Again, they're one of those teams that could be low 80s to high 80s, but does that automatically make them a postseason team? Maybe in a wide open American League, quite possibly, but I don't know. And they were in the mix last year before they fizzled out at the end, so I would have to maybe give them some dap to think that they could maybe make some hay in a division which is going to be highly competitive. But I'm not that sold on the Twins. That's just me. And then you have the White Sox, who, other than Andrew Benintendi, Andrew Vaughn, the first baseman, and Luis Robert, can you pick out the rest of the team if they were standing in front of you? Now, Garrett Crochet gone. Lucas Giolito, who left to the Red Sox last year and is starting the season on the IL, I might add, they have a rotation where you wouldn't even know if you happen to walk through their facility out in Arizona and spot them with the name and numbers in the back. I mean, is that a starting pitcher? Oh, is he the ace of the team? You wouldn't even know. And they're coming off an 121-loss season, and they could actually be worse this year, if you can even believe that. And you would think that Benintendi, maybe even Luis Robert, they could be on the trading block come July. That is a disaster in the Windy City. And I can't even expound more on a White Sox team that is certainly going to have another long year. And then in the West, again with the Astros, when you lose 2 key players and you lose Justin Verlander, who I get it that long in the tooth, he's now in San Francisco. And not to say he was going to be of any impact in their rotation, but we all know he's been a fixture there, despite the fact that he pitched the first half 2 years ago as a member of the Mets. But for this Astro team, which is now in transition, I get it. You still have Jose Altuve. I get it. You still have Yordan Alvarez. And you still have Framber Valdez going into a walk year, I might add, as your ace of the rotation. Now, the back of the bullpen, I know you still have a one Josh Hader, which has not paid dividends since he's been a member of the Astros. No more Ryan Presley. And it's not going to say a shell of his old self as far as the whole team is concerned, but definitely not a team that, yeah, they'll contend in a wide open American League, but still not a team that I feel in my gut is one that you could argue whether or not they're going to come out of the American League when it's all said and done. Then you had the Mariners. As I said before, plenty of pitching, not enough hitting. Who knows if they're going to bring in any big-time sticks to the lineup. Julio Rodriguez, I get it. He's an electrifying player, but he's not a guy that you could automatically pencil in as 30, 100, and he's going to bat 300 this year and score 100 runs. So that offense is not going to give you much. And until the front office is going to look and say, hey, we need to bring in some thunder to this lineup to be a linchpin to the rotation, which obviously is the backbone of their organization, So I'm not going to be big believers in Seattle. Yeah, they may pitch a lot of 2-1, 3-2 games, but they got to score some runs. Where that's going to come, I don't know. Then you have the Athletics, who have some thunder in their lineup. As I mentioned, the aforementioned Brent Rooker and Lawrence Butler, who's going to lead the attack, but their rotation. They got a great closer in Mason Miller, but they bring in Luis Severino, 3 years, $69 million, which is a surprise. And they're going to play the games in Sacramento. From everything that I've heard and read, Sacramento in the middle of summer is 95 degrees in the shade. How that's going to play out, that could be a benefit for the Athletics, but is that going to be a thing where those dog days are going to really hurt them as they try to maybe even be in contention for a wild card, dare I even say division, despite the fact that they are still underwhelming and do not have a team that could be built for the regular season, at least just yet. The Angels, will Mike Trout stay healthy? We know Anthony Rendon can't. And their rotation, which they've had to kind of piecemeal it together. And for an Angel team that Trout, you could argue whether or not his best days are behind him, and the injuries are starting to mount and take its toll. And in light of Shohei leaving to go up the freeway and the success that they had last year with the Dodgers, I get it that you can't think about that if you're an Angel fan, but do you really truly believe and feel and even think in a division that, I'm not going to say is up for grabs, but can they maybe be a part of it? I can't say they will, because they do not have enough horses. They do not have a pitching staff that you could believe in. I mean, Kyle Hendricks, see the guy coming from Chicago when he was a member of the Cubs all those years? And, even their day-to-day lineup, Zach Nettle's going to be out. Their shortstop, who arguably could be their best player, minus Trout. Their catcher is a very good player in a one, Logan Hoppy. And, when you bring in guys like Jorge Soler to be at least some semblance of a lineup, is that going to be enough? I can't see it will. The Rangers, can they bounce back after the hangover from last year? Jacob deGrom, a full year. He's going to have to be more of a pitcher than a thrower. And we all know he's a pitcher, but he's not going to try to top out at 99 and 100 every fifth day. He's going to try to pick his spots where he's going to have to try to throw through a brick wall. But the Rangers, can they stay healthy? Can they be a semblance of that championship team 2 years ago with Marcus Semien and Kyle Seager, Dolis Garcia, guys like that? So that's where the American League is just so wide open. Because just like I mentioned there, two teams in the American League East, I think, Yankees, Red Sox, maybe Orioles if they get some pitching. The Central brought three teams last year. If you want to throw in Minnesota, that's four. And then you have the Astros, Mariners, Rangers. I don't know too much about the Angels or Athletics, but who knows? Anything can happen. And that's your American League pretty much in a big, giant nutshell. And in the National League, it is pretty much, to me, cut and dry. Your National League, the East is going to be a beast, as you know. Braves, who I think they're going to be tough this go around. They were decimated by injuries getting to the finish line, and you saw that there when they got swept by the Padres in the wild card round. You got Chris Sale coming off of a Cy Young Award. You have Spencer Strider back after Tommy John, who's going to be, I would think, arguably could be in the running for Cy Young. Spencer Schwellenbach, who, if you recall, Met fans, who just blew you away that Monday with the Lindor heroics there, which propelled them to get to the postseason. Schwellenbach could be a stud in that rotation. I know Raisel Iglesias, dicey there as a closer, but he is a good arm. And with their lineup, similar to the Rangers 2 years ago, not only could they stay healthy, but can they rebound? Where you had 53 home runs from Matt Olson 2 years ago. Ronald Acuna Jr. on a mend from an ACL, where he's looking forward to getting back on the field. Michael Harris, who very good center fielder, but can he rebound with some big-time numbers? You have Jurickson Profar, solid pro, fits perfectly into that lineup, and I'm sure he's going to probably put up anywhere between 20, 25, 85, 90 RBIs to combat 280 to 300 in that lineup, especially with guys that are going to protect him. And Sean Murphy, who's not going to start, he's not going to be a part of the team to start, but as a guy that has a lot of punch in his bat. Braves are going to be, I think, really formidable there in the NL East. And then you have the Phillies, who went to a divisional series last year and fell flat on their faces against the Mets. But we know that they're stacked with the top of their rotation, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez. The lineup, we know they're also pretty much beyond solid. Bryce, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, Bryson Stott. Very good lineup. But are they going to be able to get themselves over the hump to where they fizzled in the divisional round, got just ambushed by the Diamondbacks in the championship series 2 years ago, and then lost to the Astros 3 years? Can they get back to the NL mountaintop? The Mets, I'm going to say for last. The Nationals, I think they're on the come up. They got a lot of good young players, headlined by the kid that everybody's looking forward to seeing this year, that his name is eluding me. No, not James Wood. No, not C.J. Abrams, if he could get his act together. Because we all know Abrams, remember, he had that incident in Chicago where he was in a casino till, what was it, like 4 a.m? And the next thing you know, he didn't get to the hotel till like 8 a.m. So they sent him home packing, goodbye. And obviously he had to make amends with the guys on his team and the organization, etc. That's what I was thinking of. I couldn't get his last name at the top of my head. I had to pull it up here. Dylan Cruz. So you have 3 good studs in that lineup. And then you have Mackenzie Gore, who's going to anchor that rotation, the lefty who they got in the Juan Soto deal from San Diego. So I think that team is going to be really good. And Keibert Ruiz, a catcher, who's also going to be a guy, part of that mix too. So I think Washington could be a team to watch out for. Not to say that they're going to be in a playoff mix because of that division is going to be stacked, but I will certainly look out for them 2-3 years down the road. And then the Marlins are the Marlins. I mean, to me, the big story coming out of Miami is whether or not Sandy Alcantara is going to be on the trading block come the deadline here in July as he comes back from Tommy John. Then the Central, I think the Brewers are the favorites to come out of that division, even without their closer, Devin Williams. And when you have Freddie Peralta as your starter, Brandon Woodruff's a guy that obviously did not pitch a lot last year, but you would think that Woodruff, he could be a guy that's going to be a good 1-2 punch at the top of that rotation. I guess the water. You would think I'm drinking seltzer and I have bubbles in the gut here. But for the Brewers, Willie Adames is now in San Francisco. I think they're going to be fine. Joey Ortiz, the guy that's just going to replace him in the position or at the position and in that lineup. So I think the Brewers are going to be fine. And you have Trevor McGill, the brother of Tyler on the Mets. He's going to be your closer. So I think the Brewers are going to be fine. Another team that's built for the regular season. I don't know about October. So you have that to deal with. And then the Cubs, with all of what they did with their bullpen, bringing in reinforcements. And to me, I'm not in love with their offense. Off to a slow start, as you know, 0-2. But I think they could be in contention there with the Brewers. The wild card in that division are the Cincinnati Reds. Because the Reds, and I think I have something in my eye, so apologize if you're watching here live. But for the Reds, Terry Francona, manager, Hunter Green, who is a guy that has a ton of talent, but if he could find a strike zone and give you some length, he could be a guy that is going to be an anchor to their pitching staff. And even though he's going to start the season on the shelf, but you have the other Diaz brother, no, of course, not the one that's in Queens, in a one, somebody's knocking on the door, Edwin Diaz, so my apologies there. But let's see whether or not he's going to have a big-time season when he becomes the full-time closer as he's nursing an injury. But for Ellie De La Cruz, who, as we all know, is going to be the guy that's going to anchor that lineup. And to me, that lineup, I need to see a little bit more on whether or not they're going to be a surprise. But with Francona and with a pitching stud like Hunter Green and Aledmys Diaz as the closer, I think that they can have a big year. Big meaning that they could be in the wild card mix in the National League. I'm not saying big as far as them winning a division and going 90-72. That I cannot see. So that's the deal with the Reds. And for the other two teams, Pittsburgh, they need more offense. I know they have Brian Hayes and Brian Reynolds, and Andrew McCutchen comes back as the patriarch of that team. And O'Neal Cruz is not going to play center field, as he's going to be out from shortstop. But for their rotation, headlined by Paul Skeens, who can win a Cy Young this year, and you got to worry about Jared Jones with that shoulder. I believe he has a shoulder issue. And you have a good closer there and Bednar. But how I look at it is that the Pirates are still a couple pieces away in order for them to maybe even being a team that could contend there. And then lastly in the division, you have the Cardinals, and they really didn't do anything this offseason. And I understand they have a lot of young players on that team, Jordan Walker in particular, that you could look at as a star that maybe could engulf this team. And their pitching, I'm not in love with the Miles Mikolas of the world and guys like that. They don't really have a solid rotation. They have a good closer in Brad Hazley, that is. But I don't know. This is a Cardinal team that may look to unload Nolan Arenado, who has a no-trade clause, but there were a lot of rumblings about him being moved this offseason, and I'm sure that's going to be brought up here when you get to the deadline. So, and I understand he has a big price tag, so Cardinals have to eat some of that, you would think, and I believe, what does he have? Just 3 or 4 more years left on that deal? I think it goes to 28, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe I think it's 28. So the Cardinals, I can see them having a lean year. And that's very rare because the Cardinals, last year notwithstanding, they've always been competitive. But this year, I don't know about St. Louis. And then out west, we talked about the Dodgers. You know their deal. Padres, no Yu Darvish to start the season. No Joe Musgrove, as you know, with the Tommy John. Dylan Cease, a guy that he's going to have to do some big things this year if the Padres are going to go anywhere. Because even without Profar and Hae-Sung Kim, who's now in Tampa, the lineup is a little bit compromised there for the Padres. You do have Manny Machado, as you know, Fernando Tatis, very good two-punch there in the lineup. You could throw in Xander Bogaerts, Jake Cronenworth, So it's not as if they're bereft of talent, but you wonder whether or not, and Darvish is not a spring chicken by any means, but you wonder whether or not that they're going to have enough in the tank, and we would think so, to be a part of the playoff mix there come the end of the year. I think they will, and they will make a deal if they need to. As far as bringing in somebody that they can add, whether it's to a rotation, bullpen, or even to the lineup. So I'm not really that concerned about the Padres, but knowing that they've had more pieces come off than pieces added on, that's where one thing I'd be concerned if they get off to a slow start. Then you have the Diamondbacks, who they brought in Corbin Burns from Baltimore, and that was huge because Jordan Montgomery, who had a nightmare of a year in the desert last year, on the shelf with Tommy John this year, so you don't have to wonder what's happened to Jordan Montgomery this year. But bringing in a guy, or I should say Christian Walker, who was gone, and that's one thing you have to worry about, where they lose out on offense, but they did bring in Josh Naylor to replace him, who could DH and also play some first base. So to go along with the Ketel Martes of the world and guys like that, I think Arizona's going to be around, and they have a good bullpen as well. Excellent starting pitching to go along with the Zach Gallens and the Merrill Kellys of the world. So I think that they're going to be not only possibly in the mix, maybe not for a division, but certainly could be a situation where if the Dodgers do sleepwalk and throughout parts of the year, I could see them maybe being within an arm's distance from the Dodgers 3, 4, 5 games back as you get into July and August. But I don't think they're going to win a division by any means, but I think they're going to be very solid and a team to watch out for here this year. Then you have the Giants with all the moves that they made, bringing in Justin Verlander, Willy Adames, etc. I don't know how that's going to play out as far as them trying to get themselves in position in an NL West that is just loaded when you think about it. But the Giants, I think they'll hang around. I think they'll play well. I don't know if it's going to be a situation where they could be a fringe playoff team. And I think you'll probably see them hang around there in August and September. And who knows what they do at the deadline. But I think they will fall a peg or two short of them making it into the top 6 teams in the National League. And then you have the Rockies. I mean, what do I discuss there? There isn't anything to get into. Am I going to talk about Chris Bryant, a resurgence from him? Am I going to talk about their shortstop? Was it Ezekiel Tovar? Is he a guy that, all of a sudden he's going to light the world on fire? And that's not a knock on him. I don't want you to think that I'm going to look at a guy like him and underwhelm his talent or his performance, or a guy that's not going to make any hay. But I know I said Ezekiel Esquiel. He's going to be good, but he's going to be lost in the Major League Baseball shuffle because the Rockies are awful. They're no good. They're not a team that's going to, if anything, you're going to look at the Rockies as who they can unload. Will the Kyle Freelands be on the trading block come the middle of July? Let me see. Who else can I pick off their lineup here? Hold on as I pull it up. Yeah, are you going to Ryan McMahon? Is he a guy that is going to be on the memory banks of a lot of GMs here throughout the course of the Major League Baseball season? The Jordan Becks, the Brenton Doyles, Jacob Stallings, who was a catcher in Miami. I mean, come on. There's no way that any of these guys are going to be a part of a winning culture, a winning team. And that's no knock on Bud Black, the manager, but I mean, I don't know how else to cut it. So that's what you have there with the Rockies. And as far as the Mets go, as I look into the camera, let me just pull up the screen here. Where is my StreamYard screen? Here we go. Let's see if anybody's made some comments here. Val, I think I answered it. How do you think the Giants will do in Major League Baseball this season? And I think they'll hang around, and who knows, they may bring in somebody at the deadline, a team or two, et cetera, or a player or two. But I don't know if that's going to be enough to go up against the likes of the Dodgers, Phillies, Padres, Diamondbacks, Mets, Brewers. I think they'll fall short. Bio, you're speaking my language, my guy, and I'm going to get to them a little bit later on. But, yeah, you and I are like kindred spirits. And when I unpack that, you're probably going to laugh off of your chair wherever you may be. So you'll get my take on you got my take on the Tigers earlier, but overall. Now, my Met preview. I'm sure if you watch the podcast, listen to the podcast, of course, you see it scrolling there at the bottom. Weekly live stream, people, 12 noon on YouTube. I know I have it on other platforms, more so in particular on my Facebook. For whatever reason, I had to have a premium account on Twitter. I usually don't go on Twitter that much. I just post a podcast there. But anyway, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, the channel, etc. The rotation scares me. And I know the Mets will make a move as they get close to the deadline, whether it would be for a starting pitcher or a reliever. And they did get A.J. Minter, who I like, a lefty from Atlanta, to go along with the Ryan Staneks of the world. And their bullpen, led by Edwin Diaz, is okay because during the postseason run last year, Jose Buto, you did not want to see. Reed Garrett, yeah, regular season was fine. Postseason, you did not want to see. And although Minter is an upgrade and Stanek, it was fine in the postseason, but there were moments where he wasn't, especially in that Dodger series. But the rotation scares me. And I understand what we see right now is not what we're going to see come July 31st. Because right now, your rotation, starting tomorrow in Houston, is Clay Holmes, a reliever of the Yankees who blew 1 million games as a closer, who's now your starting pitcher and has had a killer spring. But he is going to open up your season, followed by Griffin Canning, Dave Peterson, Tyler McGill, Kodai Senga, who I do like, but they're going to put him more on the back end because they're going to try to stretch him out with all the off days in April so they could be that quote-unquote sixth starter, because we all know the Japanese pitchers, they have a six-man rotation. All right, fine. Understood. But that is, to me, the Achilles heel of this team. Their lineup is fine. And I also wish that Francisco Alvarez was a part of it from the start, because 2 years ago you saw his full potential where he hit 25 home runs. Now, he only hit 11 last year and regressed. And we saw in the postseason in those first few rounds, was awful. He came around there late in the Dodger series, but I wish Alvarez was there. But if Alvarez was there, the lineup would even be longer to go along with Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos. That is a good five to start your lineup off with. Now, it's going to be fascinating whether or not Vientos is going to bat 2. I don't think that's going to be the case. They're going to put Soto 2, and I would think Alonso 3. But I would love Soto to be 3 and then Alonso 4 for this reason. Vientos in the 2 spot, as you saw in the postseason, was fantastic. So if you had Lindor, Vientos, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, and listen, I'm not making Nimmo out to be part of Murderer's Row, but Nimmo's a guy, scrappy, can't hit the ball out of the ballpark, very selective hitter. And I get it, 5 hitter is more of a slugger, more of a guy that's going to drive in runs. But I think Nimmo would be fine there. And you got to switch it up with lefty-righty. We know that Lindor's a switch hitter. Vientos bats right. Soto's a lefty. Alonso bats right. Nimmo a lefty. And imagine if you had Alvarez, who will be a part of the team probably in the next 6 weeks or so. But there's your righty, your top 6. After that, it does fall off. The Tyrone Taylors of the world and guys like that aren't going to have you shaking in your boots. And Jeff McNeil, another one. We got to wait and see what's going to happen with him. But their lineup is fine. Rotation, sends shivers down my spine. And the bullpen, I'm like this emoji. I shrug my shoulders. Now, here's the other thing. For the Met fan out there that thinks, we need to go to a fast start. We need to come out of the gate, especially with the way the division is. How did it work for you 2 years ago, Met fans, when they started their year? Go back and look. Check those receipts. 14-7. They won 2/3 of their games in the first 21. How did the rest of the season unfold? And then people could say, well, hey, a fast start is great. Why not? You want to start off well. You want to start off good, right? How did the Mets start off last year? They were 0-5 and about to be 0-6 in that afternoon game against the Tigers. And mind you, they got swept by the Brewers to start the season, and the Tigers won the first 2 games in Citi Field. And then they won that final game of the series in walk-off fashion. So they were about to be 0-6. And what happened? They won that game, and they were 24-35 in the latter part of May into June. In fact, June 2nd, when the Diamondbacks were in town, and the Mets were 24-35. How did the rest of the season turn out from that point on? As you know, best record in baseball, blah, blah. But yeah, so to me, they got to go through this fast start nonsense. You throw that out the window. I am not buying. You can try to sell that to me all you want. Would I prefer a fast start than a slow start? Of course. 100%. But with that rotation, and who knows if the offense are going to press to start off the season, if they're not going to be as fluid, or if they're going to be squeezing the bat a little bit extra tight. Who knows? But when it's all said and done, how I look at this team, I think this team is one of the top 6 in the NL. I believe they're going to get reinforcements. I mean, you know Steve Cohen's going to do that. Please, that you could take that to the bank. As the Mets are going to try to look ahead and try to get back to a championship series where they were just 2 games away from an improbable visit to a World Series, considering where the team was. But I think the Mets will not win a division. I think the Mets will be somewhere between 4 and 6 because they can't get top 3. That's going to go to the teams that win a division. They'll be 4, 5, or 6. I think they may be more 5 and or 6. Their number in Vegas is 90.5. I think they're going to fall a tad short of that, which they did last year. They had 89 wins. Now, if they're pitching, Jeremy Hefner has the magic dust like they did last year with the Sean Manaea. And remember, he's out. He's on the shelf to start the year. The Sean Manaeas, the Luis Severinos, and the Jose Quintanas of the world, where they were masterful last year and were a pleasant surprise. Do I see that this year? I don't know. I do not see it, even though I heard that Griffin Canning has actually had a very good spring and had some spring to his step as far as life on his pitches. But here's a guy who's 9 games under 500 with a 4.75 career ERA. So I'll believe it when I see it. But I think the Mets will get to a division series, and I think they'll lose in 5 games. I don't know if they get to a championship series. I can't even tell you. I can predict matchups and all that, but I'm not going to go there. They're going to play the Phillies again, or they're going to be a wild card team as a 6th seed, and they're going to play Atlanta if they win a division. I mean, yes, that's the fun about predicting these things, but I'm just going to go based on my gut and how far I think they can go, who they match up against. Obviously, it's arbitrary. It's up in the air, whatever. And I get it. That's part of the fun of doing sports talk. But I'll say they'll get to the playoffs, so win the wild card, and they'll get to the division series, and they'll probably lose a 4 or 5 game series. Can they get to a championship series again and face the Dodgers? I think they can. Will they? I don't know if they will. I'm just being honest. So that is my prediction of my beloved Mets. Now, surprises. Now, the next couple of things I want to get to is surprises and disappointments. So to kind of round up the baseball segment, surprises, disappointments, MLB over-under totals, and my World Series prediction. So as far as my surprises, I got 1 AL, 1 NL, and the same for the disappointments. Excuse me. In the American League, now, I would think because they're going to play in a small ballpark, I understand it's going to be sweltering hot. But something tells me that the A's are going to have a good season. Now, for them, good would be 500. And I want to let you know, people, when I say surprise and disappointments, surprise doesn't mean the team's going to go to a World Series, or they're going to go to an ALCS, or they're going to make the playoffs. Now, if they're hanging around late, that's a surprise. So, to me, the Texas Rangers, if I'm going to say, oh, they're going to be a surprise team, they're not going to be a surprise team. They won a World Series 2 years ago. And yes, there would be a surprise considering what happened to them last year. But a surprise is a team that you don't expect to do well, and oh, wow, this team is 500 on the 4th of July. Yeah, they may fizzle out. Yeah, they may fade away. Yeah, they may be poof come September 1st. But a team that may surprise you. And I'm going to say the Athletics are one that are going to do so because they're out of that cavernous relic of a ballpark in Oakland. They're going to play in what? I believe it's a 12,000-seat minor league park in Sacramento, which, from what I've heard, a lot of good things have come out from that area where they're going to support the team. And who knows if they're even going to build a ballpark there. I mean, you don't think so. I mean, Sacramento. I understand that's the capital of California, but I think for this first year, I think they're going to be pumped up. I think they're going to be ready to go. I know when you get to July and August, that could be dicey because the weather is going to affect them just as much as it will the visiting team. But with their number, I believe that's 71.5. I can see them winning 75, 77, 78, maybe even 80 games. Now, I know they don't have a rotation. I get that. But they do have a very underrated closer in Mason Miller. And hopefully he doesn't get traded at the deadline because I'm sure he has years of service left, etc. But I'm going to pick the A's as my surprise out of the American League. And in the National League, I'm going to say the Cincinnati Reds. Now, I do not love their lineup. And their pitching, they have some pitching that's coming up the ranks. So whether or not they're going to make an impact, that we'll have to wait and see. But the manager in his own right, and the Reds won 77 games last year. You mean to tell me he's not worth 4 or 5 more games? where they could go 82-80 and maybe be a team that could flirt with a wild card. Now, I get it that long season, Francona ready to go. It's not all on the manager. But again, there is some strategy, although a lot of it's thrown out the window in baseball in 2025 because, especially National League, you don't have pitchers that are batting. You have the rule with the 3-pitcher minimum or 3-batter minimum, all that, where Francona was a part of that a couple of years ago. But this isn't National League Baseball as we once knew it, dating back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, etc. But I think there'll be some improvement. Ellie De La Cruz, I'm sure he's going to be trying to gun for an MVP and to be that guy who will lead the charge of that Red offense. And I talked about Hunter Green, where if he puts it all together, he could have a big-time regular season. So I'm going to say the Reds are going to be the surprise there in the National League. So that's the two that I have for you there. My disappointments, American League. And I'm only going to say this team for this reason. I think the Seattle Mariners, granted they have pitching, when you have Luis Castillo, who regressed a little bit last year, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Bryce Miller. I mean, those are 4 potential number 1 starters. But their lineup is from hunger, man. And I like Julio Rodriguez. I really do. I think Rodriguez is an excellent talent. But he can't carry this offense by himself. And Cal Raleigh, all right, fine, great. But give me another guy in that offense that's just going to make you say, all right, well, this guy's going to have a big-time season. They're not. And I can pull up their lineup right now just for grins and giggles. So for the Mariners, bottom line is this. They may pitch a lot of 3-2, 2-1 games or 4-3 games here in 2025. But their lineup, I'm not going to look at them as a bona fide team unless they go out at the trade deadline and bring in a bat. All right, here, Rowdy Tellez. I understand he's a slugger, lefty with the Brewers. Before that with the Pirates. But come on, you can pitch to Rowdy Tellez. No knock on him. Jorge Polanco, I get it. He's had some success in his major league career, but seriously, the Luke Rayleys of the world, Randy Arozarena, I understand that he's a major league stick and a guy that has power, but that's not a big offensive team. It's not. And I'm not trying to say 1 through 9, you have to have guys that are going to hit 280 and hit 25 to 30 home runs in every part of the lineup. Of course not. But here I am just talking about the Mets. And listen, again, they're not the 27 Yankees either, but you have 5 guys in that lineup. If you go an Alvarez 6, that you could say, whoa, that's a lineup. Or if the Yankee lineup when they're healthy. And there's a few others, the Dodgers. Dodgers have grinders after Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman. And the Padres, they have a lineup, as I talked about before. That's a lineup. Mariners don't have that. So I look at them as a disappointment this year. Now, again, disappointing because they have excellent starting pitching, but they have no offense to back them up. And therefore, they could be in the low 80s just based on their pitching alone. So imagine if they had an offense. They could be easily a 90-win team. So that's why I picked them as a disappointment. And my other disappointment in the National League, and it's because they made no moves, and I'm sure they're going to try to unload one of their guys, and I mentioned them before, are the Cardinals. And people are going to say, well, the Cardinals are going to be bad, J-Real, so why even pick them? Think about it. The American League, the National League is top-heavy, as we talked about. Marlins aren't going to be a surprise team. Rockies aren't going to be a surprise team. Yeah, the Reds can be a surprise team, as we know, as I talked about. The Pirates, they don't have enough offense, but I don't think they're going to be a disappointment in that regard. Same for the Reds. Now, if the Reds go 63-99 with Francona, yeah, I would say that's a disappointment. But there aren't, excuse me, let me enunciate here. There are not a lot of teams in the National League that you can look at that's going to be a disappointment. Yes, I understand Cardinals. But the Cardinals are one of the cornerstones in the sport. They should have gone out there and made some moves, or at least shown their fan base that we're trying here. that we know that the division, although not one that could be for the taking, but maybe it can hang around and the Brewers come back to the pack and the Cubs are not really in sync. Pirates, like I said, stud pitching, but not enough hitting. Reds trying to find their way with a new manager, although a great one in Francona. And then that can leave you the Cardinals. Because so I see them just being a disappointment. And it's disappointing, and they haven't even thrown the first pitch yet. For a team with all of their illustrious, the franchise, and Stan Musial, Lou Brock, going down the list. Guys that were Cardinal lore. And here it is. They're a team that right now is in rebuild mode. So that's why I have them as a disappointment. They didn't do anything, and it looks like they're not going to try to do anything this year. So if you're a fan of the Cardinals, to my son Andre, and I'm sure you are sick to your stomach. Now, let me get to the next thing, which this is going to be fun. Where's my graphic here? Here we go. Over under win totals. Now, I choose 6. Usually it's 3 overs and 3 unders. I don't go through every baseball team, people. I'm not going to do that. And not only that, but as it is, it's an hour and 16 minutes. The live stream, I'm going to go to the bottom of the hour, probably more likely, as I'm getting ready to land this plane, because after this, I have my World Series prediction. So now you have 6 over unders, 3 overs, 3 unders, the numbers that Vegas puts out at the beginning of the year. So I'm going to pick 3 overs, 3 unders. I'll start with the overs, and we'll get right to it. Number 1, the first over, I'm going to pick the Brewers. Last year I picked against them because how I looked at it, Craig Counsell went down the interstate to Chicago for the Cub job. Then you had Corbin Burns out, Brandon Woodruff out. I didn't like their rotation. Their offense, kind of like this year, a little eh. And I didn't even talk about Christian Yelich, who's going to be your DH primarily. Even with Jackson Chourio and guys like that, I understand. Right? Reese Hoskins, etc. But 82.5, that's a division they won last year. What did they win? 92 last year, 93-ish. So 82.5 is the number. I think they'll win. Watch. I go against them last year and I lose. Watch me go with them and lose again. So I'm tempting fate here, just like I did a few years ago with the Rays, because one year I picked them as an under and they were over. And then the next year I went back to that well, picked them as an under and they were under. So let's see if I have the same. In this case, it's the other way around, where I picked them as an under and they went over. Now I'm picking them as an over, watch them go under. So that's my first pick, Brewers, based on division isn't strong, despite the fact that they lost their closer and a key figure to their offensive lineup in one Willy Adames. But I think they'll be fine. 82.5, come on. They can't win 83 games in that division. So I'm picking the Brewers number 1. I also like to be daring with my picks, too. I picked the Nationals, a team in my own division. The number is 70.5. And last year, I think it was 71 and 91. Now, Dave Martinez, who's still the manager of this team, who won a World Series, now having to go through this transition. And we talked about their young players just a little while ago. I like their young players. I like their young core. Growing pains, yes. Mackenzie Gore, can he be a guy that's going to be a bona fide number 1? To me, this is where he starts that. That's not to say he's going to go 18-6 with a 2.35 ERA, but I hope that he would go maybe 12-10 with a high 2, low 3 ERA, strikes out the world, and shows the world that, oh, okay, now I see why they traded Juan Soto away to bring in a guy like Gore. 70.5, low number. There was 71 last year. Why not? Roll the dice. So I'm going to pick them with the young core starters as they over. And my final over, I'm picking the Detroit Tigers. Bio, are you with me? Tigers. 31-11 to close out the season last year. I get it that maybe there was some luck involved, but when you get on a run like that and win a wild card round against the Astros, albeit on the road because the Astros have been terrible at home, as I talked about last year. In the playoffs, I might add, terrible. So for the skipper, A.J. Hinch, who knows his way around winning, Won a World Series with the Astros 2017. Torkelson, I think now, the late bloomer that I talked about, could have a big year. Riley Green, Matt Beerling, who I know is on the shelf to start off the year, as well as their rotation headlined by the reigning AL Cy Young Award winner, Tyler Skubal. Jackson Jove is a guy to look out for, 21-year-old who could be a Rookie of the Year. And although I'm not in love with the closer, but I think the Tigers, they had some expectations going in. Competitive division, but 83.5 is the number. I think they could get to 84, 85, 86 and still make it into the postseason, considering everything I talked about with the American League. So those are my 3 overs there for starters. My unders. Now, I get this low-hanging fruit. I thought long and hard about this, and this is probably going to bite me in the rear end. So I'm going to go from the highest low total to the lowest low total. And the highest low total is 80.5. I know I didn't go out on a limb because the American League is wide open. It's really up in the air. The Rays, 80.5. I understand they have very good pitching and a good bullpen, and Kevin Cash always finds a way. All right, last year had a bad year. No problem. But no Shane McClanahan to start the year. He's on the IL, although he's going to come back, and he's coming off of Tommy John. And guys like Shane Baz and Taj Bradley and guys that are going to be in that rotation that could keep them in some games. And who knows, maybe the Rays will be a bit on the come up here in 2025. But the thing that scares me is this. When you get to July and August and September, and in particular July and August, when you're waiting around for rain delays because they're going to play in an open-air stadium at Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, there may be some buzz. There may not be people in Tampa going to see the team that don't have to go across the bridge and then south to St. Petersburg where the Trop is. But Tampa, even with their pedigree and a tough year last year, and in a division that, who knows, Yankees, on tenuous ground. Red Sox, they could be a team that's trending north, but who knows? Baltimore, wild card, as I mentioned. Maybe they'll get to 82, 83. But when you get to July and August, when you're playing outdoors and it's 1,000 degrees, you got rain delays left and right. You know about those afternoon thunder bumpers there in Florida. And heaven forbid, you got a hurricane coming through there because you all know Tampa, that is, unfortunately, prime real estate in August and in September for a hurricane to go right through that sucker. So I think that's going to impact them. They'll be slightly below 80.5, but I'm going to pick them as my first under. Maybe 77, 78. It's probably going to come down to the final week, but I'm picking the Rays as an under. For starters, the second under, and I'm sorry, I hate to pick on this team. I want them to do well, not that I have any investment in them, but I think the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim are going to have another long year. Anthony Rendon, that situation and that contract is going to go down. That's making the Jacoby Ellsbury contract look like Max Scherzer's contract when he signed that with the Nationals in 2015. I mean, this guy doesn't play. And Rendon coming off a World Series, and he signs that contract, and, not to get into that, but who knows with Mike Trout, if he's going to stay healthy this year. And they already have, as I talked about before, Zach Neto, he's on the shelf to start the year. Logan O'Hoppe, a catcher, a guy that I'm sure they're going to bank on for big-time production. But he's another one that you have to kind of wonder about, especially playing the position that he does. And the Kyle Hendricks of the world aren't going to light my fire when it comes to that. Now, listen, one of these years they're probably going to snap out of it and maybe be better than 72.5. Last year they won 63 games. And I like Ron Washington as the manager there, but I don't see it. Maybe they're in the low 70s, right? Probably down to the wire when you get to late September for me. But I'm going to pick them 72.5. And I understand this is taking candy away from a baby, and I probably should have been a little bit more creative when it comes to the losses. And baseball last year, I was 3-3 in my over-under win totals. And who knows? It's probably going to be 2-4, 1-5 this year, similar to my hockey, which is a flat-out disaster. But I have heard and read that as bad as the White Sox year was last year, it could actually be worse. Can you imagine a team that was 41 and 121? Now, they won one more game than the Mets did that year because they were 40 and 120 and 62. The lovable losers that the Mets were in their first year of existence. But the White Sox could actually lose more than what they did last year, which means that they're going to be a 38, 39, 40, or 41 win team again. And what do you think their number is in Vegas? I don't know, Jay Reels, what, 46, 48, 50, 52? Their number in Vegas is 54 and a half. If they won 41 last year, I get it. Vegas isn't going to say, well, they won 41 last year. Their over-under win total is going to be 46 and a half. I get it. They want to show a little bit of respectability to the White Sox. But just like I mentioned before when I detailed them, do I need to go through it again? There are 3 guys that you know in the lineup that could be traded by July 31st. And their rotation and bullpen, they might as well have me starting their rotation come the first week of the season, which starts tomorrow. That's how bad the season could be. And I understand low-hanging fruit, easy to pick on. Watch them go ahead and win 55 games and win their 55th game on the last game of the season, which would serve me well. But that's concludes my over-under win totals. So to recap, overs. Milwaukee 82.5, Washington 70.5, Detroit 83.5. My unders, Tampa 80.5, the Angels 72.5, and the Chicago White Sox at 54.5. That will be my over-under win totals for the year. I see some comments. Let's see what people have said. They have spoken. Bio. Flaherty. We'll give him quality starts, not great in playoffs last year. Yep, new year, new old team. I think so. I mean, Flaherty's a guy that he's crafty. He's not going to blow you away with fastballs. He's going to be 92, 93 tops. He's going to throw a lot of slop. If he hits his corners and hits the zones, he'll be fine. But I agree with you there 100%. Now, Nike, my guy, what's going on? Hey, bro, how about the Athletics? You think the new venue? Yes, I don't know if you heard that because I'm just catching these comments now. I do think that, and I see a couple other comments there too. I'll get to Jonathan as well. I do think that the Athletics will have a good year for them. I think the intimate ballpark, I don't know how many people are going to flock from Oakland to Sacramento. It's not a far drive. I believe it's, and Bio could let me know. I know he's more from Southern California than Northern California. But I believe it's about a 90-minute ride, give or take, from the Bay Area to Sacramento. So for the Athletics, I think they're going to have a good year. They have a good lineup. They have a lot of pop. Rotation, I understand, from Hunger. They have a very good closer. I think that they'll be very good this year for them, meaning that they could be anywhere between 75 and 80 wins. And who knows, with the AL coming back to the pack, are they hanging around there for a 6th seed in the late part of August and September? Maybe not, but strange things have happened. You never know. So, yeah, it's Bio Scooble, without question. And it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to, what he's going to do for an encore, if he's going to be able to, not I won't say rebound, but if he's going to be able to do close to a carbon copy last year, as teams will try to figure him out this year, knowing that he's not going to sneak up on anybody, considering he's going to be the reigning Cy Young Award winner. So I will say that. And then Val, that's your team. And listen, we'll see what happens. The Giants are hit or miss, if you ask me. And hit being that they could be part of that mix in the NL as far as the wild card goes. So for that, and then Nike, and then yes, my guy, Jonathan, that's right, LFGM tomorrow in Houston, as we know. And like you mentioned, the SK brothers, Scooble and Skeens, now they don't play on the same team, which would be interesting. Imagine if they did. They certainly would have the SK brothers. So Scooble and Skeens, the reigning Cy Young Award winner, and maybe even the future Cy Young Award winner of this year in Skeens, and maybe Scooble too if he goes back-to-back. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And now lastly, drum roll, the moment you've all been waiting for. As I take a sip here. And, I'm right at the hour and a half mark, but that's all right. I'm going to go over, which is fine. And I'll make sure to slowly land a plane after that. How about this? For those in the chat room, if you had to take a guess, and I'll be 100% honest, because obviously I've already picked my World Series setup. I've already picked the two teams that I represent, National, American League, and the World Series. If you had to guess who are my World Series, or what is my World Series prediction, who would it be? Throw that in the room, or for those who are watching on the replay, throw it in there. I'll be curious. As you'll hear in a matter of, I'll give you a minute for those to type it in, and then of course I'll reveal who it is. Now, I guess as a precursor, is it easy to go Yankees-Dodgers, or is it easy to go top-heavy with the vehemence of the sport? Of course. It's easy to say it's going to be a repeat Yankees-Dodgers, or Yankees-Phillies, or I want to say Yankees-Mets, Subway Series, Soto versus old team. Intriguing, to say the least. Or will it be Red Sox-Phillies? Will the Astros get back there again? And maybe a rematch with the Phillies since the year 2022? Or could it be a sneaky team that's going to come out of nowhere? Could the Diamondbacks get back there? Could the Rangers get back there? All legit, 100%. And I don't like to go chalk, even in the other sports. I know for my – what did I pick? Oh, for NHL, I picked Dallas and the Rangers. How the Rangers were playing. Ugh. Scary. NBA, I did pick the Celtics and OKC. I went war. I don't want to say with my heart. Last year I picked Boston Phoenix. This year I went Boston OKC, which I really don't like to pick my teams, but how could I not, considering coming off a championship and obviously the way the team is stacked, etc. Last year I picked Baltimore, Philadelphia as my World Series finalists. And I like to be different in baseball. I like to be different in all the sports for the most part. I know that doesn't warrant that justification, because here I am saying, oh, I like to be different, but here I am picking Boston OKC, or I picked Baltimore Philly, or Dallas and the Rangers. Maybe that's a lot of people could probably pick other teams. But now as I see some comments rolling in, John, the Mets Yanks. All right, the Mets played the Yankees in the World Series. Who do I think would win? I'd hate to see it. Oh, yeah. Almost saw it last year. Maybe not almost, because the Dodgers had a 3-1 series lead. I get it. Oh, that's a tough one, especially with the way the Yankees are built right now. Who would I think would win the World Series? If it's Yankees-Mets, what the hell? I'd say the Mets. I'd say 7 games. I would say that because, again, if you're going to say right now, and it's hard to say because the Yankees are going to bring in pieces, the Mets will too. But if the Mets play the Yankees in the World Series, I'd have to say Mets. I wouldn't want to. I'd want to go against the grain and pick Yankees more or less as a reverse jinx. But how could I not do that? I'd be sick for those 5, 6, 7 games or 4 games. Who knows? I'd be sick, just like I was in 2000. So Nike says Mets Rangers. DeGrom against his former team. That's a good one. I can see that. But no, not Mets Rangers. I did not pick that by any stretch. Now, what did Jonathan say here? Yankee fans nearly ripped out Mookie Betts' arm. Imagine what Yankee fans do to Soto. Oh, my goodness. And those games are going to be hotly contested at Yankee Stadium. I'm looking forward to those. Yeah, I know Mookie Betts. And those guys got banned for life, if you recall. Those guys are idiots. When I saw that live, I couldn't believe what I was watching. And then they had the nerve afterwards. I don't know if you heard the podcast last year. They had the nerve, these clowns. Oh, we got to patrol this area. Oh, we can't have. What? Get out of here. I don't even know their names. I don't even want to give them. I already gave them enough pub just bringing them up. But, disaster. Yes, sir. Perfect 90-minute drive. I'm laughing here. For those. All right, biopic Dodgers Tigers. Excellent one. But you know what? If I had a trivia question, if I asked everybody, who did I pick as my World Series finalist? I did just that. I don't know, man. Are you channeling my inner thoughts, brain, etc.? Now, I picked Atlanta over Detroit. And people, I know, Jonathan, you probably fell out of your chair. How could a Met fan pick the Braves to go to the World Series? How? Now, if it's Braves-Yankees in the World Series, as I've said in the past, I will never, ever, as long as I'm breathing, would never pick the Yankees to win, nor do I even want them to win. So, yes, and I rooted for the Braves in the past. I rooted Braves in 96 and 99. So, but I picked Braves-Tigers, and I picked the Braves to win. Braves because I think they'll rebound from last year. When Acuna comes back, I know he's going to play with a little chip on his shoulder. Ozzie Albies is a gutty player. We know what Matt Olson could do. We know Michael Harris, Jurickson Profar. And like I mentioned, the top of their rotation, Sale. Although I think he'll come back down a little bit. I mean, he was, 18-3 last year? The guy was phenomenal. He'll come back down, but I think Strider will rise above. I think Spencer Swellenbach's a guy to look out for. I mean, those top three are excellent. And their bullpen is good. And I understand Raisel Iglesias is a guy that would shake you in your boots a little bit if you're a Brave fan, but he's a good arm. So my World Series, Bio picked it. Braves Tigers. Now, if it is Braves Tigers, I'm hoping that the Tigers win. I really do. I will never root for the Braves either, unless it's against the Yankees. But that is my World Series prediction. Braves Tigers. I don't know how you did it, Bio. And yes, just being a little different. I'm not going to go out and say, oh, it's Yankees Dodgers again, or no. Not going to do that. So there you go, people. And that will conclude my baseball preview. Anybody have thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, debates, anything crazy off the top of your head? Jay Reels, how in the hell could you pick the Braves? Yeah, I know. I like to be different sometimes. And yeah, I get it. Even with what did I pick in the Super Bowl last year? I picked Buffalo, Detroit, which, and listen, both of those teams didn't even make it. Detroit didn't make it to a championship game, and Buffalo obviously didn't get to a Super Bowl. So, yeah, the Mets have good vibes starting to see. I think they do too, Bio. I really believe that. And they go to Houston, and I think that's a good test for them too to start off the year because now Houston are down the Astros of 2017 to 2023, and mind you, 2023 was just 2 years ago. It's not as if we're talking about this happened 10 years prior, but I do think that there's a good test. Then after that, they go to Miami to play the Marlins, and then they play Toronto, their home opener, before Miami comes in. So, all right, these first opening games, an interesting test, and crazy schedule quirk because they play tomorrow, of course, Friday and Saturday, and have a day off Sunday. I mean, how weird is that? So day off Sunday, as they'll fly to Miami and they'll play the Marlins. And they'll play the Marlins, in fact, and I wish I could have gone on my birthday. My birthday is Monday, for those who do or don't know. And I'm not trying to throw that out there to be like, hey, whatever. But, yeah, I say that because I wish I was in Miami to watch my Mets down there. And, in fact, if you watch any of my vlogs on my YouTube channel, I did give you a little feel of Mets Marlins in Miami. It's the Escape to Florida Miami vlog. So you want to check that out if you want to go back and peep that. I implore you to do so. I'm in the ballpark. It was the first time I was in Marlins Park since 2015, as I made that my annual right to go down there when they opened the ballpark 2012 to 2015. And then from 16 through 23, I didn't even go. And then last year, by happenstance, I happened to be there, and the Mets were there, so I went to go see one of the games. So if you want to check that out, I appreciate it. And Nike ads, I'm pumped for the season as much as I am for my grandson playing at high school level. Yeah, and your grandson doing big things. That's great to see. Nike, I've been following that on your Facebook profile, so kudos to him. Kudos to the fam, too. Much props to him. And, yes, Bio, great sports minds think alike, and I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody. Jonathan, Bio, of course, Val, whomever else dropped in on the chat here this afternoon. Val, yeah, I think that's everybody who's dropped in today. My usual suspects, who I think I'm going to call you guys the usual suspects who hop on board. And as you know, as time goes on with these live streams, it's going to gain traction, people. It will. We got a bunch of people banding back and forth, having this chat room open for you guys to chime in, share your thoughts as I posted here on the chat room and posted here on the live stream, which this is what it's all about. And again, I thank you guys for hopping on board. Yeah, Nike, I know, laughing out loud. that'll do it. I'll get into a lot of the other stuff on the podcast tomorrow. I know I talked, an hour and 40 minutes. I haven't eaten yet. I've been fasting since yesterday, so I definitely want to eat. Got a couple of things to tend to this afternoon. So call us Jayhawks. All right. Yeah, you can call us that. Why not? The Jayhawks. And that's another thing, too. Let's close out with this. I'm kind of thinking of a name. Maybe I'll use Jayhawks. I'd have to get your thoughts, everybody in the room. And for those who are watching the replay, please feel free. I've been thinking about having a moniker for the diehards like yourself, and for those who are going to, of course, continue to follow, which one more time, grateful and thankful for you guys. I was thinking about doing like Reels Army, or I'm not going to use like Reels Rascals. I mean, it sounds weird. Something alliterative, which would be nice. Kind of figuring that out. Maybe I'll start with Jayhawks. I kind of like that. To my Jayhawks out there. Yeah, I've kind of thought about that because, as I say at the end of every one of my podcasts in particular, let alone live streams, I'm not going anywhere. As you know, sports in the blood and the DNA, and I just wanted to have more people jump on board with us and ride this sucker as long and as far as we go, as long as I'm alive and breathing, because I'm going nowhere, people. I do this now 3 times a week with the 2 podcasts, obviously the live stream here now every Wednesday, which is great because I interact with you guys. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this live stream and will continue to do so. So I guess with that being said, if you can think of a nickname, throw it in the chat room. We'll pull a tally. I'll see if it feels good in the gut. I may go with it. But that will put a lid on the Major League Baseball preview. And as always, for those who joined on YouTube, and I believe I had it through my Facebook profile, thank you so much for hopping on board, taking precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say, in this case, about what's happening in the world of baseball. And if you haven't done so, like you see it scrolled on the bottom, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review, Apple, Spotify, whichever podcast platform you listen to, especially if you're one that you're on the treadmill, or if you're cleaning or driving, maybe you plug me into your car, that'd be great. Fantastic. Or whichever other podcast platform you listen to. And then obviously YouTube, you get the visuals there. You also get the visual on Spotify. If you're a Spotify diehard or one that is attracted to the Spotify platform, you also get video there. So certainly I don't want you driving in the streets watching me. I mean, you can if you're a great driver, but whether you bring me to the gym on the tripod, or if you have it on this background, I don't want to say noise, but you know what I mean? Again, it goes a long way to get the word out to the family, friend, foe, frenemy that's out there that like sports, love sports, casual, diehard, the kooks like we are that are in the chat room talking sports. Please, I implore you to do so. Take a screenshot, send it to me on my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J Reels Podcast. I'm more so on Instagram than any of the others. TikTok, I try to frequent more as I try to increase that platform. But please send a screenshot. I'll send it in my Instagram story one more time to the family or someone that's interested in sports or just likes content in particular. Please send it to them. I'll be more than happy to follow up with them and send it out, etc. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion, you can do so at the aforementioned social media accounts or the old-fashioned way at the jreelspodcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals and a couple of comments from my guy Bio, the marathon that is. Yes, cannot wait. Funny enough, how you, in your gut, Dodgers Tigers. What is the opening day as the banner will be raised in center field as well as the ring ceremony? Tigers and Dodgers. So who knows? Maybe it'll come full circle there for you, Bio, when it's all said and done. And yes, it is. Baseball is life, my first love, as you well know. So, like I mentioned, question, comment, hit me up on any of the aforementioned. Because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love, people. Not only talking baseball, talking sports, a lot to get into tomorrow. Yes, I'll talk about Aaron Rodgers. The likelihood of him being a Steeler now that Russell Wilson is a New York Giant. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about Damian Lillard. Now he has this blood clot similar to Victor Wembanyama, who, as we all know, he's shut down for the rest of the year, although Wembanyama had it in his shoulder where Lillard has it in his calf. Of course, March Madness picks up where it left off on Sunday with the 4 games tomorrow and 4 games on Friday, which I'll preview those. And I'll talk a little baseball, too, to start the year. Obviously, no preview, but I'll talk a little bit about that, talk about the schedule heading into the weekend, unpack that, and a lot more as we close out the month of March in grand style, thanks to you guys and gals. Because as you know, in the blood, in the DNA, sports just oozing out of every one of my pores. As long as I'm in front of this microphone and camera, you know I am going to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the J Reels podcast always comes, in this particular case, live, direct, correct, and in full effect. And lastly, the Jsters. I know I've had somebody many moons ago call me J-Star as a nickname. J-Stars. You know, listen, I like that. Get a little bit of a consensus here. We got Jayhawks, got J-Stars. We'll play around with that here as we move it along, and maybe we'll come to some sort of conclusion on a future live stream every Wednesday, 12 noon, as you see there at the bottom of the ticker. Let's see what else we got. Nike, yes, my man. Take care to you. Blessings to you and all as well. And nickname Fresh Jays. The Fresh Jays? The Fresh Jays. Hey, like a pair of Fresh Jays, Jordans? I don't know. There'd be some, maybe not copyright infringement, but you know somebody will come at me with that. Maybe Nike for that matter. Can't call yourself the Fresh Jays because they got it copyrighted somewhere or it's infringement, whatever, so who knows. But I'll keep that in mind as well. As a matter of fact, I'll type that down on my phone. Fresh Jays, I'll still be up on the chat even once I close it out. So from the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next Wednesday or even tomorrow, if you're going to listen to the podcast as you well know it, on the flip, baby. Peace and love.